Hey everybody, welcome to the second video in my Let's Learn Python series with Pycharm. Okay, so now that we have Pycharm installed and now that we have our sort of first project area to set up, and we have our first file, testing.py, let's just give you a quick retour of the interface if you're already up to this point. So again, down here you have the terminal. This is the same thing as your bash terminal, so same thing as this thing. And then you have your Python console. Okay, which is your REPL. So here I can type in things like 5 plus 5. Okay, so if I just want to run basic commands and get a response right away. Okay, I probably won't be using that much, so terminal is really what you want to be on. Okay, and you can add multiple terminals. Let's see what happens if I click on that. So it just creates another one. Okay, I'm just going to close that out. The more you run, the more slow this stuff gets. So I'm going to close this out, just close some of this stuff. Cool. Now, here we're working in testing.py. We're going to keep things simple for now. And Python's pretty straightforward. Okay, if this is your first programming language, this is probably as easy a programming language as to learn, but it's also super powerful because you can literally do data science, web development, software, mobile and desktop software development, really anything you want with Python. Blockchain development. It's a very powerful language. And if you ever run into an issue where speed is becoming sort of your issue, there's another programming language called NIM, which is basically just Python, just compiled so it's faster. So if you ever hit a project where Python being an interpreted language is affecting speed, consider NIM. Okay, and what does that mean? Python is what's called an interpreted language, which means that when you type in a program, so if I type in this backprint hello world, this gets read when I run it. So save. Is it auto saving? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. So when I hit save, then I type in here, I type in Python 3, because Python 3 is a command on Linux. Testing.py is the file. Hello world, it reads the file and runs it right away. Okay? So it's doing two things. It's reading it, then running it. A compiled language, what it does is that it does 3 steps, but at different times. So if I'm the developer, I'm done making the program, I'll then compile it, at which time a compiler will read the document, compile it into a machine-readable form. And then the user runs the executable, which is in that machine-readable language. So that way when the user uses it, it skips those previous steps of having to read and interpret. It just has the code already ready to read. Okay, which is faster because you don't have to, again, interpret. There's pros and cons of both ways of doing things. I mean, if you're just making scripts for your computers to run on the fly, a scripting language like this that's interpreted is nice because I can just write some code and it does the thing. But again, as you start doing more and more complicated programs, the speed hit of interpretation begins to become more apparent, which is why there's the compiled version, NIM. Okay, so again, later on, if that becomes an issue and you want to have a compiled version of Python, then NIM is your programming language. Cool. So in the same way, Crystal is the same thing for like Ruby. Cool. So now so far we've learned one command, print. And what does print do? It prints text to the console, prints hello world. And how do we know? It prints whatever you put in here. Okay, so I can put in more than one thing in here. So let's try this. I can do hello plus world. This is what's called concatenation. And in Python, if you want to put like comments in your code so you can like put definitions and whatnot, it's always started with like a hash, if I remember correctly. So doing hash, this is concatenation. Okay, what am I doing is I'm combining what's called a string. A string is always a collection of like letters, and they're always denoted by quotation marks, whether it's single quotes or double quotes. So now if I run this file again, generally when you're in the terminal, if you push up, it'll take you right back to the last command you ran, so that way you don't have to type in that command all the time. Okay, And you see it adds them, but see there's no space now because I never specified a space in any of these strings. So I could add a space to hello right there, and then that should make it look right. See, hello world. Okay, you see it right over here. Cool, so that's concatenation. That's one way to combine strings. And that is very neat. Now the thing is, let's say we wanted to say hello to somebody who's named 1. Okay? So I put 1. Now 1 is not a string. See, there's no quotation marks. So in this case, 1 is an integer. It's a whole number. So this may throw me an error. So let's find out if it does. And it does. Why? Okay, is that you can't be concatenating multiple types of data. Okay, so there's strings. So there's a couple ways I can solve this. I could turn that 1 to a string like this, and then it'd just be like hello 1. Or I could force that number to be a string. If I remember right, you just type in string, then I put in the number 1, and this is a function. Let's see, I'm not sure if this is the right spelling. It might be uppercase S. Give me an error. And now it's frozen. There we go. See, import generator 3, constant, create function string, no. So yeah. Is it uppercase S string? Or I think it might be just stir. Yeah, it looks like it's what it is. Okay, for string. There's always a function for every type of data. And if you want to change one type of data to another type of data, you just wrap, see this integer, 1, inside this function string. And you know it's a function because there's like a word, a name, followed by parentheses. And the way you want to think about it is that this is a command, print, and I'm going to give that command some information, that function some information to work with, which is what's inside the parentheses. And then so in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want to run this command, string, and I want to give it this information. So let's say, let's automatically saves. So that should also work. Yep, and it works. See, it took that number 1 and turned it into a string. Okay, cool. So now we know. If I want to parse, this is what's called typecasting. You're changing the type of one piece of data to another piece of data. Okay, so let's make a note of that. To typecast to a string. Cool. Okay, and then I'm just going to put another quotation mark here. Now let's try interpolation. I haven't tried interpolation much in Python. I use it a lot in JavaScript. But if I remember right, in Python, we would just use print. Okay. That's always your command to print to the console, so that's pretty straightforward. But you're going to put a letter F before your string. So if I put the letter F before the string like this, then I can use what's called interpolation, which means I can then inject data into... So let's see here. Let me give this a shot. So look at this dot dot dot, and then I think it's curly brackets, and then I can put in any kind of expression here. So I'll just put 5 plus 5. Okay, so what's going to happen is that because of the F, it knows to look for the curly brackets in the string, and then inside the curly brackets is basically goes back to Python world, and I can put any kind of Python expression there, and it should print it out. So let's try it out, make sure that works. Although you can see by the colors, it's not complaining about anything, so I think we should be good. And there we go. See, look at this. 10. So this is interpolation. Okay, allows me to inject all sorts of information right into the middle of a string. Okay, and you could, with that, you could also even inject variables. So let's actually create variables. So for example, let's say we put 1. We made a variable called 1, which you can name it anything you want. Just has to be letters. Can't be like just a number. But let's say we have a variable called 1. Variable is just a place where we can store data. And we just say equals. Now, equals doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean these are the same thing. Think of it at equals as I have the thing on the left, the 1, is like a storage bucket. Okay, I have this bucket called 1, and anything on the right of the equal sign I'm going to store in the bucket. This is referred to as assignment. So 1's going to equal the string of hello. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going to assign hello to the variable 1. And see, 1 is not a string, it's a variable because it doesn't have quotation marks. So whenever it sees a bunch of letters with no quotation marks, it assumes that this is a label for some variable. So this is you must be trying to store something in this thing. So we're storing hello in 1, and then we'll do 2 equals world. Okay. And so in this case, we're going to assign world to the variable 2. Okay, so we're assigning world to the variable 2. And let's try this out. Let's print 2 strings, so print. And first what we'll do is we'll just do concatenation. So we'll just say 1 plus, and then a space, plus 2. Okay, so there's our concatenation. And notice I didn't write hello world, but it should still give us hello world, because it's going to print whatever is stored in 1 and whatever is stored in 2 right there. Now if I do this through interpolation, print. Okay, and again I gotta put that F in front of the string. F1 space 2. Okay. Now we hit save. Cool, and see both of them end up with hello world. So whether I'm using concatenation or interpolation, I can have the same kind of fun with strings. Okay, so what have we learned in this video? We've learned how to use the print function to print text to the console. We learned that in printing text to the console, we can use concatenation, where we add strings together, or we can use interpolation, where we take one string and then sort of inject information inside of it. We've learned that if the data that you're trying to print is not a string, you need to make it a string. So we can use the string function to typecast it as a string. Okay, and then when we create variables, the equal sign doesn't mean equals, it means assign. It means I am putting this into this. Okay, so I will wrap that up on this lesson. I'll see you guys in the next lesson.